Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. Yaakov Avinu settled in the land where his father lived, which was the land of Canaan. This is the first pasuk in Parshas Vayeishev. And of course, it's the story of Yaakov Avinu after he returns from dealing with Lavan, which is Parshas Vayeishev, and dealing with Esav, which is Parshas Vayishlach, and he's home. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. And of course, we all know the Chassidus. And basically, what the Chassidus is that Yaakov Avinu had birurim. Yaakov Avinu had things that he needed to do in this world to correct. And basically, it was Lavan and Esav. The difference is Lavan is an Arami. Lavan is a deceptive, disingenuous, duplicitous man who portrays himself as Lavan, as white, as pure, as perfect, and as holy, and his whole game is Arami, a thief. It takes Yaakov Avinu 20 years to deal with Lavan. Esav is a Rasha, and he says to your face he's a Rasha. And what Yaakov Avinu accomplishes with Lavan in 20 years, he manages with Esav in a day, in one day. Because you have Oyev and Misnakim, an overt enemy and a covert enemy. An overt enemy may be more dangerous directly, but at least there's no duplicitousness. You know exactly where you stand with him. In a covert enemy, the part of the dealing with the enemy is the recognizing that he's an enemy altogether. And Yaakov Avinu succeeds. Yaakov Shalom Ir Shechem, the Torah tells us. He comes home Shalom b'teirasei and Shalom b'mameinei. He's accomplished. He's achieved what he needs to achieve. And of course, we have the Rebbe Sichos on Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. And one of the most wonderful Sichos of the Rebbe is on Rashi. That Rashi says, Bikish Yaakov leishev b'shalva kafetz alav rugza shel Yosef. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'dayin tzadikim. What's prepared for them liyased lavei. That Yaakov Avinu comes home and he wants to live a serene life, a peaceful life. And the Eibishter says, is it not enough that tzaddikim have Elam Haba, and in this world they're not entitled to a shalva, to a serenity, and therefore kafatz alav rugza shel Yosef. What follows, of course, the story of Yosef HaTzadik and the rest of the history of Yaakov Avinu's life, which of course is going to culminate with Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim Shvasrei Shana Vayechi Galept. The 17 best years of Yaakov Avinu's life is going to live in Mitzrayim. So in one of the Sichos of the Rebbe on this pasuk with Rashi, Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan, Bikish Yaakov leishev b'shalva, the Rebbe says an incredible thing. Every neshama has a shlichus. Every person comes into the world with a mission, with a mandate, with something they need to achieve and accomplish. And when they achieve that, they've achieved their primary purpose for living on this earth. It doesn't mean that as soon as you finish your shlichus, you're kaput, your life is over, because there's so many other things that a person can do during his lifetime. But there is a basic shlichus which each person has. The Rebbe spoke once by Fabrengen, that the story of the Yosef Balagola, Yosef the coachman, how he was a coachman for 2 years and then he was able to bring to tshuva one yid, whose name was Shlomo Leib, Bal Tshuva. And the end of the story was that when he went to the Mittel Rebbe the first time, the Mittel Rebbe said to him, Mittel Rebbe's face was radiant, and the Mittel Rebbe told him, the Tatas Bamir gewesen, my father came to me, what mir gesagt, as Yosef Balagola to ausgeführt de Kavana. That the Alter Rebbe said to the Mittel Rebbe that Yosef, the wagon driver, fulfilled his purpose on this world. And then the Mittel Rebbe said, the Tata hat gemacht von a Gon a Balagola for the Teve von a Yochid, und ich will machen von a Balagola a Mashpia for the Teve von a Rabbi. My father made from a Gon, from a great scholar, a coachman to save one Jew, and I'm going to make from a coachman a Mashpia for the benefit of many. He told him to go home and sell his horse, and he became the Mashpia in Beshenkovich, and he was Meidach Yom, a big Arichas Yom, and Beis Balagola. So the Rebbe spoke about this many times, and once the Rebbe said that every person, of course, has many purposes. There's a lot of missions. But there's one Iker mission, one primary mission. The Lashon, you live 70 or 80 years, do a favor for one Jew. And that's the primary mission of the person. Everything else is additions, their tesefes, their details, and so forth. So when Yaakov came home, after being Mavada Lavan, and being Mavada Esav was done, he was finished. In theory, Yaakov Avinu's avoida in struggling with Elam Hazeh Birurim was done, and he could have been lived in a peaceful way, like it says in the Chazal, that tzaddikim with Chilasam Yesurim v'Seifim Shalva, his Yesurim, his Birurim were over, and he was now in a position to enjoy the serenity of his later years beyond the Birurim. But Bikish Yaakov Leisha B'Shalva translates the Rebbe, he wanted more. He had already achieved the purpose for the reason that the Shama came into this world, to the Birurim of Lavan and Esav. And he was entitled to a Menucha, he was entitled to a Shalva. But Bikesh Yaakov Leisha B'Shalva, he wanted more. So because he wanted more, he had to have additional Goliyes, and that was the goals of Yosef HaTzadik. Tzaras Yosef, Tzaras Benyamin, Tzaras Shimon, like Rashi, Tzaras Dina, like Rashi says. And that's the pshat in this pasuk, right? That it says in Rashi and the Mefarshim and the Chassidus and in the Rebbe Siches, Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz meguri aviv be'eretz Kenan. On the one hand, this means Yaakov's struggles were over because his shlichus was complete. On the other hand, because Yaakov would want more, he would have to go through more. And the shalva which he sought, the biggest Yaakov Leisha B'Shalva, he would experience, but it would only be the last 17 years of his life. It would be for the 17 years, Tev Shana, that he lived in Mitzrayim. This is one of the many pshatim on this pasuk in the Rebbe's Teira, the Rebbe's Siches. Now we're learning a Maamer from Malton Rebbe, who also explains the pasuk Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz meguri aviv be'eretz Kenan. And obviously, the Alter Rebbe is not just explaining the pasuk in Pshutim Shal Mikra about Yaakov Avinu's physical existence on a pshat level, but it's of course on a level of Pnimiyas HaTeira. So I want you to know that in a lot of Maimorim, they explain Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz meguri aviv be'eretz Kenan as birurim. Be'eretz meguri aviv means to collect treasure, which is collecting sparks. Be'eretz Kenan also has to do with birurim, as you'll see in this Maamer actually. So many of the Maimorim will explain that Be'eretz meguri aviv and Be'eretz Kenan are the same thing. Eretz Kenan has to do with birurim, with schayre, with business. And Meguri is what the collection of sparks, yes? This Maamer, however, goes in a very different direction. And it goes in a different direction to such an extent that it becomes very difficult to figure out how to structure a class. I mean, I'm teaching it. So I prepared it, and if you look at the PDF, you'll see that I put Koisarois, I put in Kepelach, I put in headings throughout the Maamer. But in this particular, after all the preparation, on all the thinking and learning, this is one of those Maimorim that requires a lot of meditating. In other words, is the mechus says Yossi ala Magula. You have to think. You can never be sure what Alter Rebbe means. So you learn it and you learn it and you learn it and you teach it and you teach it and you teach it and you walk away when you're saying, maybe I taught it correctly. You understand? But the way this Maamer has to be read is Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz meguri aviv, Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz Kenan. That's how you have to read it. It's like two different things. It's not Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz meguri aviv be'eretz Kenan that are both speaking to the basic accomplishment of Yaakov Avinu's life, or to the place in which Yaakov Avinu was already, or the place that Yaakov Avinu was going to be in the future. But rather it's distinct, two different ideas. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz meguri aviv is one idea, and Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz Kenan is an entirely different idea. The first idea, be'eretz meguri aviv, is very lofty, it's very high, and be'eretz Kenan is much lower. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn this Maamer not in the order of the Maamer, but in the order of these two topics. We're going to learn Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz meguri aviv tonight, and the next time we get together, we're going to learn Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz Kenan. It's almost like two Maimorim within a Maamer. And of course, how you can explain this, you can explain it as being two different people. You can explain this as two different avodas within the life of one person. You can, like I said, there's a number of perhaps other ways that you can explain it as well. But basically, you have these two inyanim. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz meguri aviv is a much more edel idea, and Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz Kenan is a different idea. Now, the constant between them is Yaakov goes on the neshama, and Eretz goes in Elam Hazeh, right? The neshama comes into this world. But there's two this worlds. There's the this world of Eretz Megurei Yaviv, which is very ruchniistic, very spiritual, very high. And there's the this world of Eretz Canaan, which is much, much lower. And as you'll see in Mitzvah Hashem in the next year, that it includes also Zman HaGolus. Okay? So, appreciate how we're approaching this. We're learning, this is the Maamer from Alten Rebbe. We're learning this Maamer. We're not going to squeeze into this Maamer a different Maamer. Like I said, in other Maamorim, Megurei Yaviv is connected to Birudim as well. And Eretz Canaan is certainly connected to Birudim. In other words, they make him into one Avodah. But not this Maamer. This Maamer makes Eretz Megurei Yaviv something very spiritual. I guess if you had to use words, you would call it Torah and Tefillah. And Eretz Canaan is Birudim and Mitzvahs, I suppose. Okay? So we're going to learn tonight Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Megurei Yaviv, and we'll learn next time Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Canaan. Okay, so let's begin. The pasuk starts on line 3. Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Megurei Yaviv. Yaakov lives in the land where his father lived. Be'eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan. Says the Rebbe Lahavan Inyan Zeh. We have to understand what's the chassidus behind this pasuk. Now, of course, everybody knows what it means. It's a pasuk in Chumash. And ein mikra yoytze midei pshute. Every biblical text, every word of Torah is precise and exact. In other words, it happened actually. Yaakov Avinu was a physical man who lived in the physical place of Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan, at a particular physical time. None of this is esoteric, and none of this is metaphor. It happened b'peil mamish. And Yaakov lived for many, many years as a ish tam yeshav v'holim, learning and davening, removed from the world completely. Then he went 14 years to Shem Ve'evid. And then, of course, he went off into Golus, to Lavan for 20 years and then 2 years. And during that time, he was created the Yud Beis Shiftei Ka, the Jewish people. The idea mitasei shlema, Yaakov in his bed is perfect. All of his children were tzaddikim. And then he came home, come back to his father's house. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz Megurei Yaviv be'eretz Canaan. But the Alter Rebbe's question is, what's the chassidus? The pshat of the pasuk we understand. But what's the chassidus? What's the pnimius? What's the neshama of this pasuk that he's living? He's settled in Eretz Megurei Yaviv, and he's settled in Eretz Canaan. Gam, moreover, Kefel Loshen be'eretz Megurei Yaviv be'eretz Canaan. It says twice. He lived in the place where his father lived, in the land of Canaan. It's sufficient to say be'eretz Canaan. Perhaps if you want to say be'eretz Megurei Yaviv, you could say be'eretz Megurei Yaviv b'Canaan, or just be'eretz Megurei Yaviv. Why do you have to have twice Eretz Megurei Yaviv and Eretz Canaan? And specifically, why do you have to have the word Eretz twice? So the answer is, the teretz is halech lifnei havaya be'artzis achayim. The David HaMelech says, I'm going to walk lifnei havaya, before God, in the lands of life. So there's life, and then there's Eretz Achayim. There's the land where life is. It's a land of life. It's a living land. You go to this place and it gives you chayes. So the Rebbe is medayik sheshnei aratzis. That artzis achayim is loshan rabim, is plural. That's the miyat rabim shtays be a minimum of them. Shei beis bechinas kelim. Two different types of kelim. Both of these kelim are kelim for the same basic thing. Lashroas chayim elyenim, for the manifesting, for the resting in a uncompromised way of supernal life. But there are two types of eretz. And because you have two types of eretz, two types of vehicle for chayim, so obviously you're going to have two types of chayim that correspond to it. In other words, when you bring life to two different bodies, even if the life is the same, if the bodies are different, the way the life and the bodies are going to react to each other will affect how the life is going to manifest. So the pasuk says, Artes achayim loshen rabim. So then there's chayim al yein resting into each one of these two aratzes. Whether the chayim is the same or the chayim is distinctive is a detail. But certainly the aratzes are different, the lands are different, so accordingly the chayim is going to be different as well. And of course, this is what I told you in my introduction. One of these aratzes is called Eretz Megurei Yaviv, and the other one of these aratzes is called Eretz Canaan. What's the difference? Eretz Canaan is about the struggle of Elam Hazeh. Eretz Canaan is you come into this world and there's klipa and there's enemies and there's concealments and there's blockages and you have to overcome them. And when you overcome them, you conquer them and you defeat them and you transform them and you uplift them and you bring holiness into them and so on. But there's also Eretz Megurei Yaviv. Eretz Megurei Yaviv is this world, this earth, the same place. But Eretz Megurei Yaviv is how this world is experienced by, I guess, by tzaddikim, by gehoibin mention, by higher people who don't encounter Helam veheste, they don't encounter blockages and obstacles in this world. They simply encounter a world that they need to fill with divine light. And that's Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Megurei Yaakov. That's the first level. It's a much higher idea. It's a neshama coming into a world which is also very supportive of Elokus and Ruchnius, and therefore its life as a reflection of that involvement. And then a much lower level, which is the Eretz Canaan. Okay? So I want to do me a favor, and I want you to go all the way until line 113, which is it's 2/3 through the Maamer, but that's how we're going to do this. Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Megurei Yaakov. Yaakov Avinu settles, which means the neshama comes from Gan Eden, and it comes down into this world, and it settles. It inhabits Eretz Megurei Yaakov, the land which is Megurei Yaakov, where his father lives. And the Rebbe is going to explain this pasuk. I mean, just to cheat, if you look ahead on the page 148, the Rebbe is going to bring the actual pasuk Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Megurei Yaakov. But he starts off this higher interpretation by explaining the word Yaakov. Okay, we're dealing with Vayeishev Yaakov Be'eretz, the first 5 words of the pasuk. Yaakov settles on this world, on this earth, but Eretz Megurei Yaakov, this world as it belongs to Aviv, to his father, to Yitzchak Avinu. So he begins like this, by interpreting the word Yaakov. It says in the pasuk Hakel Yaakov. But this is in Pashas Teldes. That Yitzchak wants to give a bracha to Esav, and Yaakov comes ahead of him. And Yitzchak senses that something is wrong, because Shem Shemaim Shagav Afiv, he mentions Hashem's names, and he speaks much more softly. So he says, come close, I want to touch you. So of course he touches Yaakov Avinu's hands, and Yaakov Avinu's mother, Rivka, had put on his hands the Oiles Gedi Ha'izim, the skin, the fur of the goats. So he was touched by his father, Yitzchak, who was blind. And he felt that he was very hairy, like his brother Esav was, as opposed to Yaakov Avinu, who was Ish Cholok, very fair. And Yitzchak says the famous words, Ha'kel Kel Yaakov Ha'yadayim Edei Esav. You sound like Yaakov, but you feel like Esav. And then he gave him the brachas. So of course there's so much discussion on this pasuk, Ha'kel Kel Yaakov Ha'yadayim Edei Esav. Every father tells it to his children when they fight with each other. He says, Ha'kel Kel Yaakov. Jews can negotiate settlements, like Yayim Edei Esav. But there's also, of course, much chassidus on it. And there's chassidus on the first words of the pasuk alone, Ha'kel Kel Yaakov. Look at the Torah in Maamer. Shana Yom Kippur, the Maamer that speaks about the David in Shana Yom Kippur begins Ha'kel Kel Yaakov. And what's the remez? The remez is that there's 2 coils. And the first coil is missing a vav, and the second coil has a vav. As it's printed here, Hakel, the first one is Hey Kuf Lamed, and the second one is Kuf Vav Lamed. And of course the difference is the first voice, which is without a Vav, means a voice which is above the world, a higher voice, if you will. The second voice, which is with a Vav, is a voice that draws down. So in some Maimorim, the first voice would be Tefillah, which is crying out to Hashem and going out of this world and engaging in unifying oneself with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the second kel with the vav is bringing the Eibush down, which is basically Ninat Teira, the idea of Teira. So first of all, he explains the word Yaakov. We'll see momentarily. He says, first of all, Kadma Chaser Vav. The first kel is missing a vav. Shu Bechinas Kol the Law Shtama, which is a voice that's unheard. V'kel Basra. The second kel is Malay Vav. It does have a vav. Shu Bechinas Kol the Shtama, which is a voice which can be heard, which a custom of Zeir HaKadosh. As is explained in Zayah. Now, if you've been around with us on this journey, which is going on now close to a decade, Baruch Hashem, Larich Hashem V'Shonim, this topic of voice has come up many times. You have it in the Maamer Ayin Tes, Rosh Hashanah Tishrei Ayin Tes. The Rebbe speaks about different kinds of koil, and in other places in Chassidus as well. And basically, it's broken down into a number of levels. The lowest kind of koil is called a koil murkav. What does a koil murkav mean? Voice that speaks words. Words, by definition, have to have order. In other words, words, by definition, have to have reason. Words that have no order and words that have no reason are useless. They're nothing. So when a person speaks, and of course, according to the Zohar and according to Hasidus, the voice comes from Hevel Alev. What you speak comes from your heart, comes from your emotions. What you say comes from your passion. Nafshe yotza bedabre. The lowest level of speech is that you're giving out your heart through the spoken word. If you're giving out your heart to the spoken word, there's something reasonable, there's something measured about how you speak. So your speech makes sense. Your words are logical, your words are reasonable, which is good. But it also means that your words are finite, they're limited. So your emotions, your heart, your Hevel Alev is being communicated through form of audible words, because the words are carrying the feelings of the heart in a way that words can carry feelings of the heart, which is a measured way. And then of course that you have what's called Kala Pnimo, a deeper voice, an inner voice. What's a Kala Pnimo? It's an inner voice. A gishrei, a cry that has no words. When somebody's in incredible pain, or if someone is in a great state of joy, they cry out. And this crying out is the deepest expression of the neshama. And the proof is that you can't articulate it in words. Sometimes a person is in a condition of great joy, or in great sadness, or in great pain, or in great delight, that what comes out of them is a sound that has no order. They can't break it down. In other words, words can't carry this experience, because words are finite, and words are divided, and words are organized. This is a pure expression. So it's Kala Pnima, an inner voice. So it's a cry that has no order, has no limitations of words. And then of course there's Kala Pnima de Shtama and Kala Pnima de Lo Shtama. When you talk about a cry, a voice, that's so intense, it's so deep that it can't be put into words, the lower level is that even if you can put it into words, at least it's audible, you can hear it. And in the language of Rosh Hashanah, that's called a Tkiya. And then even higher than that is a voice which is so high that not only can't it be put into words, it can't even be put into sound. It's called Kala Pnima de Lo Shtama. It's a voice that comes out not only without words, without any sound. And this is, of course, in the language of Rosh Hashanah, Shvarim Truah. So here the Rebbe says these two coils, the coil with a vav and the coil without a vav, the coil without a vav is called the Lo Shtama, a voice which is not heard. And the coil with a vav is called the Shtama, the voice which can be heard. Now, again, if we wanted to nitpick, we would say the voice that can't be heard obviously has no words, right? So it's the highest kind of sound. Not only is it a Kala Pnima, it's a Kala Pnima de Lo Shtama as opposed to Kala Pnima de Shtama. But the one with a vav is with words, it is with sound, with voice. The question is whether it's voice, a Kala Pnima de Shtama, or it's a Kal Murkav, it's a lower kind of voice. And we'll let the Rebbe tell us what it is. We'll try to figure it out as we go. Then because you have this pasuk, Hakel Yankov, the Yankov Avinu is two kinds of voice. A voice that's so deep that not only it has no words, it has no sound. And a voice which is able to come out and expressed in an articulated way because it has sound and it has voice, and maybe even it has words. To whom do these two voices belong? To Yankov. Hakel Yankov. That's what the Rebbe now addresses. Ubir Hadvarim. The idea is, Hine. The word Yaakov is made up of two words, Yud and Akev, the letter Yud and Akev, which means a heel, as we all know, correct? Now, of course, if you're familiar with the Chassidus, Yaakov Avinu has three names: Yaakov, Yisrael, Yeshurun. The lowest of these three names is Yaakov, and it's the word Akev, which means heel. It goes on Yaakov Avinu being in a subdued state, in a bittul state. Of course, Yisrael means the Yid, who's in a much more rich and revealed condition. And Yeshurun is even higher than that. So the Rebbe says, what's Yud Akev? Pirush, it's two opposites. The Yud is the highest thing, and Akev is the lowest thing. Pirush, Sha'ayud utchilas ha'machshav. The letter Yud of Yaakov comes from the highest levels, the beginning of Hashem's thought vis-a-vis the creation. B'Yud nivra elam haba, that Hashem created elam haba with a Yud. And if you're familiar with the Tanya Gersa Kedesh Tim and Hey, that the higher worlds are created with a Yud, the lower world is created with a Hey. And the Yud is a very theoretical us, right? It's the highest level of ACAs, and it's connected to Chochmah. The Yud of Yaakov is the same thing. And then the Rebbe says, "Hu nimshach lebechinas Akev v'regel." It comes down to the heel and to the foot. Shu bechinas the dibur, which is the concept of speech, which is the lowest level. So the word Yaakov denotes bringing the Yud of HaKadosh Baruch Hu all the way down to the heel. Now, of course, when Yaakov brings HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the highest levels to the lowest levels, all the way down to the heel, in as much as Yaakov itself is concerned, it's behelim, right? You're bringing Takalakus from the highest level to the lowest level, but not necessarily is it revealed. Okay, but nevertheless, Yaakov brings from the highest level to the lowest levels. Says the Rebbe on line 117, Yaakov, therefore, the word Yaakov denotes Mavriach min hakotza lakotza, it bores through from one edge to the other, from the highest level to the lowest level. In other words, Midesh kol darg, for the highest of all steps, until the lowest of all steps. And of course, you know this from Chassidus, that this is the difference between Yaakov and Avram and Yitzchak. The Yaakov Avram is Kav HaChesed. Yitzchak is Kav HaGvura. It says in Kabbalah, Veistach Kav Echad Kotzer, Kav Echad Orach. But Teferes, the middle pole, is Mavriach min hakotza lakotza. It's a nachal that has no limits whatsoever. It goes from the highest levels to the lowest levels. And the word Yaakov denotes both the highest level, that's the letter Yud, and the lowest level as well, which is the letters Ekev. Ubechol madreges alyenis. No matter what level you're going to go, in whichever one of the supernal words you're going to address and speak of, there's always going to be the head of that world, which is the Yud of Yaakov, and the foot of that world, which is the Ekev of Yaakov. No matter what the level is, which Kosvas even described about Mashiach, that even Mashiach is going to have the union of raglayim, of feet, and it's understood in mystical terms, the lowest madrega of Mashiach, and so on and so forth. And al derech zeh, v'aretz adem ragla, the Eibush has the footstool. This is the Maamer that we just finished learning now this year, Tafshin Ayin Tes, the second Maamer look at the Torah. Ki asher hashamayim achadoshim, v'aretz achadoshim, that Eretz is the Eibush's footstool. Uksiv umokem ragli achaber, the Eibush gives honor even to mokem ragli. So in each world and in all of Ishtalshalos, you have this phenomena of Yaakov. The Yud meaning how Yaakov is connected to the highest thing, and Ekev means how it's brought to the lowest levels. Yaakov bechinas Yud Ekev, and the word Yaakov, the person Yaakov, the idea of Yaakov, brings the Yud to Ekev b'chol elam ve'elam lefayarke, from the highest world to the lowest world. The word Yaakov denotes bringing a lakus from the Chochmah, from the Yud, all the way down to the heel. And now he explains it by talking about the words Hakel Kel. And it seems to me that he does it backwards. In other words, you see what I did? Line 121, I have a Kel Yaakov, but the first Kel is in brackets, the second Kel is not in brackets. And then if you turn to page 130, it's Faket. I put the second Kel in brackets and the first Kel outside of brackets. And again, the reason this is confusing is because if you understand what Alter Rebbe is going to say, L'cha'eda, he should first explain the Hakel without a Vav, which is the higher level, and then afterwards he should explain the Kel with a Vav, but he doesn't. He first explains the Kel with a Vav, and then he goes back to explain how the Kel without a Vav is higher. And even though I'm reading this Maamer not in order, like as you've noticed already and so on, but this I'm going to go straight. I'm not going. This is enough disordering on bottom of the Alter Rebbe. So bear in mind that what we're going to be learning now is Kel with a Vav, which is going to be the lower level. And afterwards we're going to say, Hezachain, in order to have this lower level, you have to first have the higher level. And the higher level is going to be the Kel without a Vav. So let's go. Zog the Heilige Rebbe on line 122. The voice that can be heard. And as I said before, it's not only that it can be heard. It can be heard with words, with form. Who bechinas hateda is the phenomena, the concept of teda. Because what's the idea of teda? Words that carry ideas. It brings godliness down into worldliness on a level of form and words and understanding and so on. Like, for example, voice. But it's revealed, and that's audible, and that's form. It connects and brings forward from the deepest and darkest resources of the secret cavities of one's personality, but they should be revealed through speech. So on the one hand, that's quote speech, only speech. Speech is a davar chitzeni, a davar galur. On the other hand, the Kel with the Vav means how the voice is carrying an inyan pnimi b'yos, a deeper inyan. And the Rebbe says, Teda is this way. Teda is the second Kel with a Vav, because it's bringing the godliness to a revealed state, but it's bringing it from a very high place. He bechinas Chochmei La, Teda is the higher wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which you'll see in a moment is the letter Yud from the word Ekev, which is bechinas Chakim V'le B'Chochmei Dia, Hashem's wisdom that it says in Tikkun Ezer, that we say on Fridays, that Hashem's wisdom is not a wisdom that we're able to know, it's a different kind of wisdom altogether. And from there it comes down into spoken words that we're able to understand and relate to, etc., etc., etc. We don't really know the reasons for the mitzvahs, which means to say that although we have this chokhmah, but it's leiber chokhmah yadiyah, behind this chokhmah there's an even deeper chokhmah which you don't know yet. Leyez biz galus have to be revealed in a rich way, in an abundant way, in a broad way. Lahavin kolim kisei deseha, to understand all the depth of the secrets of the Torah, the prati pratis in great precision and great detail. In general and in certain areas, we have certain revelations about why we do what we do. But in most things, time Torah lein is galsa, so you have to take a chokhmah, but lebe chokhmah yadiyah. Chokhmah is Eibishter's wisdom, which is of course how Hashem speaks with words, kvayachol, so to speak. But it's not fully revealed. You don't have a full appreciation of what this voice is bringing down, and it's therefore called lebe chokhmah yadiyah. You don't know what it is completely. Line 127, if a nimshachan is brought down, lebechina gil to be revealed, all the way to the lowest levels, idei, yes, labshusa with vadam gashma being manifest in physical things, say this Rayma made, which deals with agriculture and time and so forth. Torah deals with reality. It's one of the great curiosities of Torah that we all believe, we all know, we all accept that Torah is Amun, the Eibishter's toy, the Eibishter's playthings. Ve'aya etzlei Amun, ve'etzlei Shashuyim. Shashuyim yem yem, Mesechachis b'chalecha b'chaleis, Mesechach b'tevel artzei. Ve'Shashuyim has been a other. Torah has so many levels. And Torah has very, very, very high levels. Like this idea of Chakim Lebe Chochmah Yedi, we don't really know what it is, but it comes down into speech and into action in our worlds. Line 128, V'hu b'chinas Keil. V'hamshacha, this is the voice that brings down in a revealed way the Yud into Akev. Akev would be the lowest level, that means this world. And the letter Yud is the Yud Nivre El Mabah, the point of Elokus, which is hidden behind everything, including this world. That mi bechinas Yud, Shu Chochmeh La, that is a Yud which comes all the way from Chochmah Vatzilus, which is Ein Seif. Lias Nimshech is brought down on Akev to the level of the heel, which is a Yevasir. So the Rebbe just explained to us the second word Koil, with the Vav. But it's called Koil Yaakov, a voice which is heard, and a voice which makes sense, which provides a vehicle for bringing Yaakov, the Yud of Yaakov Avinu, into the Akev, into the hill of Yaakov Avinu, in a very revealed and in a very, very healthy way. Says the Rebbe on line 131, but it's not so pashut. A Yid learns Torah. No, you learn Torah, you Debish into the world. In this endeavor, you don't see Yetzer Hara, you don't see Helam Veheste, you don't see Klipa, you just see a Yid learning Torah. And the pasuk is saying that Keil Yaakov, the voice brings the Lakus into this world. And it's true, in this part of the Maamer, we're describing a Yid. And we're describing a Yiddishkeit where there isn't a struggle with the darkness of this world. But the struggle must be. Avoida has to be, otherwise it's nothing. And therefore the Rebbe says that before the second Keil, there's a first Keil. Before the Keil of Torah, which brings God from heaven to earth, Malmaila Lamata, there's the first Keil, which raises of earth to heaven. Says Rebbe Achidei, Adam Kli Yumach, in order for a person to be a vessel and a seat. That wisdom that's supernal. That means Chochmah Vatzil, the Yud of Yaakov, should be manifest and revealed in him, basic in his study of Torah. And it should be in a way that he experiences godliness. It's not just that he's learning it and understanding, but he's experiencing the Elokus Shabaya on some level. Tzadach liyas tchila b'chinas bittul has to be first, the Keil without a vav, which is the notion of bittul b'chinas usa de liba, which means the will of the heart. You'll see in the next class, in the part of the Maamer which I so conveniently skipped, that there's going to be a considerable discussion about Re'usa de liba. At a certain point. And Usa the Liba, which means literally the will of one's heart, is Nina Mesiris Nefesh, giving yourself away to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Before the Torah can bring the Eibush into this world, there is a voice of our own, there's our own Koil. And this is called the Usa the Liba, the will of one's heart. And this cry that a Yid does from the will of his own heart sets up his ability to bring Torah down into this world on a level which is called Yaakov, Yud Akev. So again, even though the order of the Maamer seems to put the voice of Torah first, but chronologically, first you have the Keil of without a Vav, which I'm going to say means Tefillah, the Mesiris Nefesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that allows that when you learn Torah, you should later bring a Lakus into this world. And then you have the second Keil, which is the actual Limud HaTorah, which is bringing godliness into this world. Says that Abvu Bechin is called Lo Shtama, which is a voice that has no sound. In other words, not only are we dealing with a voice that has no words, which give order to the sound, but there isn't even an audibility. The cry is so deep that not only is it beyond words, it's beyond sound. And this is a Re'usa de Liba, this is a rush, this is a thrust of a Yid running to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in a different part of the Maamer, he connects it. And we're going to be learning tonight on line 153 and on to Yirei Law, to standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mamish. And this Yira sets up that later when you learn Torah, you bring the Eivish down into this world. And this is going to be the Taj Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Begurei Yavam, as you'll see later on. Zokter on line 134. Now the Ruach Amshech Ruach, that one spirit draws another spirit. That Leyes Eir Hashem, in order to effect that the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu should descend from heaven to earth, from higher to lower. Sheiru Mizgalabe, to be manifest and revealed in the person and in the world in a way of Yaakov. That Hashem's wisdom should be in his innard, and it should be in a revealed way. And the mind that he possesses. Love should be in a state of total bittul HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There has to first be this Re'usa Deliba. And the Re'usa Deliba is, this is the cleaving of one heart to another, or another word that says in the Pasuk, Elakai B'kirbi. The Pasuk is Al She'en Elakai B'kirbi. And the Alter Rebbe, of course, spins it the other way. There's a concept of Yesh Elakai B'kirbi. Elakai B'kirbi doesn't mean Teiru Mitzvahs. Elakai B'kirbi means Dafkas Rucha Baruch. Now, just very briefly, and again, these are ideas that come up again and again in these classes, that in Tanya Perek Mavav, Perek Mem Zayin, Perek Mavav, Perek Mem Hey, and so on. The Alter Rebbe is going to speak about 3 levels. There's 3 levels of a connection with Yid and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The lowest level is called Chibuk, an embrace, a hug, which is mitzvahs. The second level is called a nishikin, a kiss, which is of course Torah. And then the highest level is Dafkas Rucha Baruch Hu, a joining of one spirit with another. The spirit of the Yid and the spirit of the Lakus should join and become one, which is of course not just high but very, very deep. And as Dafkas Rucha Baruch Hu is, let's say, Pnimiyas HaTorah or Kavanas HaMitzvahs, it's not only higher than mitzvahs, it's higher even than Torah. So the Rebbe says, the Kol Pnimah Lo Ashtama, the Kol without a Vav, which is a cry of desire to be one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's so deep it doesn't come out even in sound, sets up the second Kol with a Vav, which is the concept of Limud HaTorah that brings the Yud down into Ekev and bringing godliness into this world. Says the Rebbe, Uksiv, the Pasuk also says on line 139 of Awesome, Dvarei Beficha, that the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are in a Yid's mouth, that Dvarei Mamish, the words of Hashem Mamish, are in the mouth of a Jew. That though it's true on the one hand that the words of the Eibishter is halacha, or the words of halacha, the Eibishter's words mamish, he haniglas bay, nevertheless is revealed in this rav, in this chacham. It's speaking through his throat, and of course you will know the pshat shebadava that you have in Chassidus. 2 basic madregas in learning Torah. The lower level of learning Torah is called HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yeshiv Kedev V'Sheni Kenegdeh. You're learning and Hashem is responding to you. So you learn first and he answers you. The higher madrege is Tan L'Sheni Imrasecha Keni Achar Akede. Hashem reads and you answer after him, which is a much, much higher level. So in this line and a half, 139 and 140, the Alter Rebbe is making this argument that in order for the Torah to be killed with a vav and bring godliness down into this world, which means that the Yid is responding to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Eibishter learned, and we repeat after him, the precondition for this occurring is in of Re'usa Deliba. The idea that a Yid learns Torah on this madrege, where he's not really learning, he's repeating after the Eibishter, is an incredibly high level. And the Akdama to this is the infant Re'usa Deliba. V'lachein ne'emar ala Torah, which is why it's written about Torah, and the people who study Torah, that in the Torah, kings rule. In other words, a Yid who learns Torah becomes a king over the world through the Torah, because in the Torah has Hashem Mamish, the Eibishter speaking through him, but it only works if first you have the Re'usa Deliba, which we mentioned earlier. V'amininu the Chazal say, Man Malka Rabbana, that a king is a Talmid Chacham, umasnit the Malka is a Torah shebal peh b'klal. It's called a Melech, and the Vart is, Kiliyeh, say bittul advar Hashem, if you have first a bittul to the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the inyan from Kel without a vav and the infant Re'usa Deliba, or it's saying the Chachmas and the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the person, in as much as he himself is concerned, has no substance, no self-worth, other than his mission, other than that he works. For the Meibishten Hine, Dvar HaMelech Hu HaShilta, and the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes dominant in him. Fu Bechinas Melech, and therefore he becomes dominant in relationship with others. If the Eibishter speaks through you, everyone's bottled to you, but they're not bottled to you, they're bottled to the Eibishter. Hu Bechinas Melech, which is the concept of a king, Shegezer ve'emer, that decrees, and he says, Shem Yitin Ruven Kach, V'chulu, yeh kach. Reuven says this and Shimon says this. The halacha is going to be kach v'kach. V'chein lasses kach, v'shalei lasses kach. V'chul, the king gives instructions, do this, don't do this, and so forth. V'einei b'b'chinas eved. And one is not a servant of this king, and of course you would want to be a servant of this king, because in being a servant of this king, you have a relationship with this king. It's kiyum basiyas ha-mitzvahs, by doing the mitzvahs. Shu ke'eved ha-makayim mitzvahs ha-melech, as a servant who fulfills the commandments of a king, v'eised devarim, he does his words. Now I just want to observe that even though the Rebbe here in this one line spoke about mitzvahs, but l'chayri means the mitzvahs where they're written into the Torah, to understand in the limud ha-Torah, the alakus which is behind the mitzvahs. Tam l'sheni im resech. So we explained the word Yaakov, and we explained the second word Kol with a Vav, and we explained the first word Kol without a Vav. Having explained, and the sequence, of course, is first you have to have Re'usa the Liba, the Kol without a Vav, and it brings to the second Kol with a Vav, and so forth. So now on line 148, the Rebbe goes to the pasuk, but he only explains the first 5 words. V'zehu, this is the pshat. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz magurei of Yaakov, Avinu lives, settles, finds peace and harmony in the land where his father lives. Now, in the Mitzvah tomorrow, next time we get together, we're going to learn the other part. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz Canaan. It's longer in Kamas. And perhaps the Rebbe is explaining it better, but it's clearly a separate inyan, and I'm dividing it into 2 this way because I want it to be clear. So he says, Vayeishev unyan hashpala v'yirid. The word Vayeishev means to settle, to descend. Before you were standing and now you're sitting down. Of course, the nimshal is before the neshama wasn't Gan Eden, as the Rebbe is going to explain earlier in the Maamer Vayeishev in the next class. And then the neshama is nosav. You other say from the highest levels to the lowest levels. Find yourself in elam hazin, a goof, a mishcha dechiv, etc., and has to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Vayeishev means you come down. But there's Vayeishev Yaakov, where as you settle, the yud automatically comes into the Eikev. Upirish. Shebechinas Yaakov, Vayeishev Yaakov, that Yaakov is settled, that the madreg of Yaakov Avinu, who represents the idea of heel, which is a lower level of Yiddish and Neshamis, brings the Yud into the Eikev. Nimshach ve'nishpa lihiyes is drawn down and is lowered to be be'eretz meguriyav, the land where his father lives, and you'll see in a moment the word mogur is the word eitz, the land of his father's treasure. Umagure yesh beis pirush. There's 2 translations to the word magure. Ha'alef lashon yira, gure means fear. And Vabeis Lashon Oiter, the second means treasure, like Magura Malaya Peiret. Shuklisha Eitz and Latech. So Eretz Maguriyav means the land where Yitzchak fears HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the land where the fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was available to him as well. Yeah? So now line 153. Zakter, whether you translate Magure from the word Yira, or you translate Magure from the word Eitza, they basically mean the same thing. They both converge perfectly. Because Yiras Hashem Yitzhar, the Gemara says, based on a pasuk, that one of the special gifts that somebody can have is that Yiras Hashem Yitzhar, that the fear of God is his Eitzer, is his treasure. So a treasure is called Yiras Hashem, and Yiras Hashem is called Eitzer. If you're familiar with the Basi Lagani, the feeding of the Basi Lagani, which the Rebbe reviewed so many times. So one of the biggest conversations in the entire Maamer Basi Lagani is L'hoven Inyan Eitzer Shel Maila, or L'maila. What does it mean? David has a treasure. And when you get to the end of the Maamer, he mentions at least once that this treasure is Eitzer Shel Yiras Shamayim. The treasure is not hidden in the heights of heaven. The treasure is hidden in the heart of every single Jew, and it's the inyan of Yiras Hashem. So Vayeishev Yaakov. Yaakov comes down from a higher level to a lower level, and he brings the Elikus from the Yud to the Eikev through Be'eretz Magurei Aviv to the Yiras Shamayim of his father. The Gemara uses the expression Eitzer Yiras Shamayim. So the Rebbe says, Shebechinas Yiri Lo Yiri Beishitz, it's the higher kind of fear, which is Bechinas Bittul, and then you have a Kli Kibul, a Chochmei Lo, Sheyeshedo Mezgala Bei. So Magurei Aviv means a Yid who's holding by your Yiri Lo. And Vayeishev Yaakov, Be'eretz Magurei Aviv, when you're holding by Yiri Lo, so then Yaakov Avinu settles amongst you. And this means Teda. So the interface is, the curl without a Vav is Milmat Alamaz, ascending upwards to give yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the inyan that of Re'usa Daliba, or Eitza Yiras Shamayim. And then you have Hakel Kel Yaakov with the Vav, which is the concept of Teda that brings heaven down to earth, so to speak. And this is the concept of Yaakov Avinu. V'nikra Magurei Yav, it's called the Moga, which means habitation or treasure of his father. Yaakov, the word Yaakov is connected to the word Yud, which means the pintle of truth, and Eikev means heel. It's only a trace and a ray and a reflection What's brought down by Bechinas from Chochmei Law, from the level of Chochmei Law, Lahamshach Atzeif Kol Dagen, it comes from the highest levels to the lowest level. And Vayeishev Yankov Eretz Meguri Yaakov means that not only is Elokus coming down into the Madrega of Yaakov, but wherever it is, Elokus is going to come down from heaven to earth, in all places. Hu Bechinas Ha'ara V'Hamshachim Bechinas Chochmei Law. It brings down from the Yud of Yaakov, which is Chochmei Law, the Hamshech Atzeif Kol Darget, to bring it down to the lowest levels, and Chochmei Law Nikra Aviv. So Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Meguri Aviv, in this case, Yitzchak represents Chochmah because he's the father of Yaakov Avinu, and of course the father is Chochmah, the mother is Bina. So Yitzchak represents Chochmah and Yiras Hashem. And when you have the Yiras Hashem first, the Ruth of the Liba, and then you have the Chochmah, so you bring down Chochmah all the way into the lowest worlds. Shai, it does the Taij, Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Meguri Aviv. Yaakov is settling, he's coming down into this world. You can call it Dira B'Tachtenim. But what kind of Tachten is it? It's Be'eretz Megurei Yaakov, that you have a Yirei Law, a Yirei Beishes, a Yirei of standing in front of the king, which is Agdama to bringing down the Elokus of Torah into the world, the Koil with of. Says the Rebbe, this design of Koil Yerida B'Shvil Hamshocha, Aliyah B'Shvil Hamshocha, Aliyah B'Shvil Yerida, that there's Reusa Daliba and Yirei Law which sets up Yankov Yud Eikev and bringing the Lakus from high level to the lowest level, is the idea of the higher unity of V'zdabkas Rucha Baruch, and the joining of a spirit with a spirit, which is Be'esek HaTeid in one's learning Teidah, Li's Batal of his Barach, to be Batal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Beginners Chochmei Law, Kanal, the higher level of Chochmah. And I already told you earlier what V'zdabkas Rucha Baruch means. V'zdabkas Rucha Baruch means not only do I have a connection to Hashem, and not only do I have some kind of a conscious connection to Hashem, but have a connection to Hashem where the goof is out of the picture. The neshama of the Yid and Kvayach HaLaharul, the neshama of Elokus, are joining directly, and it's in a way of Hergish. So when you learn this, which is what? It's the first 6 lines, that's how we did it, the first 3 lines, and then from 113 until 159, Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Megurei Yaakov is an incredibly lofty spiritual thing. The Yaakov is on a very high level, and he achieves an even higher bittul, and he's zeichet to an even higher gilu. And in the next class, we're going to learn the other half, which is going to explain to us Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Canaan.